In 2023, 6 companies processed more than 90% of all prescription drug claims in the United States. Not 6 coalitions, not 6 industry groups, 6 private corporations. They were not elected, they do not make drugs, and they do not touch a single pill. They are pharmacy benefit managers, or PBMs, middlemen hired by health plans to control the cost of medicine. The Government Accountability Office confirms what they do in dry language. PBMs administer drug benefits, negotiate rebates, influence drug pricing, and use pharmacy reimbursement arrangements that include spread pricing. That 90% figure comes from a Federal Trade Commission interim staff report released in July 2024. It is not an estimate from an industry group. It is a federal regulator counting the claims. And the same report found that the largest PBMs are vertically integrated with health insurers and pharmacies, companies that own both the payer and the pharmacy counter. Now, here is the part that should stop you cold. A PBM can pay a pharmacy $20 for a drug, charge the health plan $30 for that same prescription, and keep the $10 difference. That gap has a name: spread pricing. It is not a glitch. It is written into contracts. The same middleman also collects rebates from drug makers, payments that are supposed to reduce net costs, but often remain invisible to employers and patients. So a system built to cut drug spending contains a built-in incentive for the middleman to profit from high list prices and wide spreads. That is not a niche problem. It affects an asthma inhaler in Tulsa, an insulin pen in Fresno, a cancer pill in a Chicago suburb. The same 6 companies sit between the doctor's prescription and the patient's hand. And here is the paradox. The more they save, the less they earn. If a drug's price falls, the rebate shrinks. If a spread disappears, the margin evaporates. How did the cost controller become a toll booth with a stake in every transaction? That is the contradiction at the center of American medicine's most powerful, least understood actor. This is not a story about one drug. It is about the system that decides all of them. And the patient pays the toll without ever seeing the toll booth. The gatekeeper's cut is written in invisible ink. The pharmacy benefit manager began as a bureaucratic fix. In the late 1960s, health insurers were drowning in paper claims for prescriptions. Every drug claim required a clerk, a form, a stamp. A company could process those claims faster and cheaper. That company was the first PBM. For 2 decades, it was just back-office plumbing. Verify eligibility, calculate the copay, send a check to the pharmacy. Then, in the 1980s, large employers realized that prescription drugs were becoming a serious cost line. They asked PBMs to do more than process claims. They asked them to negotiate discounts with drugstores and manufacturers. That was the moment the middleman stopped being a clerk and started being a buyer. By 2006, when Medicare Part D launched and handed private PBMs tens of millions of new seniors, the industry had become indispensable. The payment chain now looks like a wiring diagram built by an engineer who loved secrets. A drug maker sets a list price, a gross figure that almost no one actually pays. A health plan contracts with a PBM to manage the pharmacy benefit for its members. The PBM designs a formulary, a list of which drugs are covered and at what tier, and uses that formulary as leverage. A drug maker that wants a favorable spot on the formulary agrees to pay a rebate to the PBM, often a percentage of the list price. The health plan pays the PBM a negotiated amount for each prescription based on that list price. The PBM then reimburses the pharmacy at a different, usually lower rate. The patient pays a copay or coinsurance, often calculated from the list price, not the discounted net price. So every prescription passes through at least 4 transactions: drug maker to PBM, PBM to health plan to PBM, PBM to pharmacy. At each handoff, there is a price, and at each handoff, someone can keep a margin. The 6 largest PBMs now sit at the center of that diagram. 3 of them, CVS Caremark, Express Scripts, and OptumRx, are not independent middlemen at all. CVS Health owns CVS Pharmacies and the insurer Aetna, along with CVS Caremark. Cigna owns Express Scripts. United Health Group owns OptumRx and a network of specialty pharmacies. That vertical integration means the same corporate family can negotiate the rebate, set the formulary, and fill the prescription. Most patients never see any of these prices. They see one number, the copay at the counter. The employer sees a premium and a rebate line item, but rarely the net amount actually paid. The pharmacist sees a reimbursement that may be below what it costs to stock the drug. The drug maker sees a rebate that has become a toll to get on the formulary. This is the blind spot. A system designed to make drug costs rational has made them less visible than ever. The result is a system where the entity responsible for reducing drug spending is also the entity that benefits when drug spending stays high. In the 1990s, drug makers began offering rebates to PBMs to secure preferred formulary placement. That practice turned the formulary from a clinical guideline into a financial negotiating table. By 2010, the rebate system had grown so large that some employers demanded pass-through contracts, but most remained locked into opaque traditional models. GAO's 2024 report confirmed that state regulators struggle to see inside these contracts because PBMs claim trade secret protection. Not all PBMs use spread pricing. Many use pass-through models where rebates are fully passed to the plan and the PBM charges an administrative fee. GAO found that both models exist, but the pass-through model is less common in large employer plans. Medicare Part D's private market design meant the government does not negotiate drug prices directly. Instead, it relies on PBMs to negotiate on behalf of millions of enrollees. That outsourced negotiation is now one of the largest single sources of PBM revenue. Consider a formulary committee meeting at a large pharmacy benefit manager in 2023. The room is sterile. The agenda is dense. Two drugs treat the same condition. Drug A has a list price of $600 and offers the PBM a 40% rebate. Drug B has a list price of $100 and offers a 10% rebate. The clinical evidence is similar, but not identical. The committee's financial model lights up on drug A. That drug delivers $240 per prescription in rebate revenue. Drug B delivers $10. The PBM's own margin grows when the list price is higher, not lower. This is not a conspiracy theory. It is arithmetic. The Federal Trade Commission's interim staff report describes exactly this incentive. A PBM can earn more from a drug with a high list price and a large rebate than from a cheaper alternative. Formulary placement is the weapon. If a drug maker refuses to pay the rebate, its drug is placed on a higher tier with a larger patient copay. Doctors can still prescribe it, but patients will pay more out of pocket, and many will switch to the preferred alternative.
So the rebate is not a discount to the patient, it is a market access fee paid to the gatekeeper. Now add vertical integration. The same PBM may also own a mail-order pharmacy or a specialty pharmacy that dispenses high-cost drugs. A patient with a chronic condition needs a drug every month. The PBM designs the network so that its own pharmacy is the cheapest option, maybe even the only option for a 90-day supply. The patient's copay stays the same, but the prescription fills at a pharmacy owned by the PBM's parent company. The employer pays the PBM for the drug, the PBM pays its own pharmacy, and the parent company books both the PBM fee and the pharmacy margin. A benefits director at a mid-sized employer sits across from a PBM account manager. She asks, "How much of this rebate actually comes back to us?" The account manager opens a spreadsheet. It shows a rebate number, but the contract does not guarantee a pass-through percentage. The benefits director realizes she is not buying a service. She is negotiating with a counterparty that has better information than she does. Beyond rebates and spreads, PBMs collect administrative fees from drug makers for data, and they charge pharmacies network access fees to process claims. These are separate line items that escape most audits. In a normal market, an intermediary that reduces costs captures a small fee. In the PBM market, an intermediary that increases the list price can capture a larger rebate. That inversion is the core pathology. A patient at a pharmacy counter in 2024 does not see a price, she sees a copay. That copay may be based on the list price, not the net price after rebate. So the patient pays a percentage of a fictional number that no one else pays. Rebates do not lower her out-of-pocket cost. They lower the plan's net cost, and sometimes not even that. Consider the same patient with a chronic condition. The PBM's parent company owns a specialty pharmacy that ships the drug to her door.
The health plan pays the PBM a price set by the PBM. The PBM's specialty pharmacy fills the prescription at a cost known only to itself. The parent company records revenue twice, once as PBM, once as pharmacy. The employer's auditor sees two line items, not the consolidated margin.
That is the hidden motive. The PBM is not a neutral agent. It is a for-profit company whose revenue depends on the size of the transaction, not on shrinking it. On July 9, 2024, the Federal Trade Commission released an interim staff report on pharmacy benefit managers. The report was not a lawsuit. It was not a final ruling, but it hit like a cold front. The FTC staff documented that the 6 largest PBMs had cornered nearly the entire market for prescription claims, a concentration not seen in almost any other American industry. The report also documented that those PBMs are vertically integrated with health insurers and pharmacies, and it described financial incentives that may disadvantage patients and independent pharmacies. The word may matters. The FTC stopped short of declaring every contract unlawful. It said the structure creates conditions that can harm competition. That was the turning point. The obscure middleman was now on the front page. In the same year, the Government Accountability Office published a separate report on state regulation of PBMs. GAO found that states have taken sharply different approaches. Some states have banned spread pricing in Medicaid-managed care entirely. Others require PBMs to report rebate amounts and retention rates. A few have tried to regulate pharmacy reimbursement rates, only to face legal challenges. The result is a patchwork. A PBM operating in Ohio may face one set of rules, while the same PBM in Texas faces another. Independent pharmacies have been the loudest voice in this fight. They allege that PBMs reimburse them below the cost of acquiring the drug, then steer patients to PBM-owned mail-order pharmacies. The FTC report catalogs those complaints. The report also notes that independent pharmacies have closed at an accelerating rate, and many owners cite PBM reimbursement as a primary cause. Consider a hypothetical but common pattern. A small independent pharmacy in a rural town buys an asthma inhaler for $30. A PBM network contract says the pharmacy will be reimbursed $25 for that inhaler when it dispenses to a patient covered by a certain health plan. The health plan, meanwhile, pays the PBM $40 for that same prescription. The PBM keeps $15. The pharmacy loses $5 on every fill. It cannot refuse the prescription because the patient's insurance card requires that network.
So the pharmacy either loses money or leaves the network, and if it leaves, its patients have no local pharmacy. That is how a pricing formula becomes a survival decision. PBMs also design preferred pharmacy networks that give patients lower copays if they fill at certain pharmacies. Often, those preferred pharmacies are owned by the PBM's parent company. An independent pharmacy that undercuts the PBM's own mail order price can still lose volume because the insurance card directs patients elsewhere for a lower out-of-pocket cost. The low out-of-pocket cost is subsidized by the PBM's own margin. Not every contract works this way. Many PBMs use pass-through models, but the opacity means no one can easily tell which model is in force. Employers and state Medicaid agencies have tried to audit PBMs. They often cannot. Contracts contain confidentiality clauses that hide the actual spread. Drugmakers, for their part, say rebates have become a mandatory toll. A drugmaker that refuses to pay a rebate risks losing formulary access, which means millions of prescriptions. So it pays. The rebate is then cited as evidence that the drugmaker raised the list price to fund it.
List prices rise, rebates rise, net prices may even fall. But the patient's coinsurance, based on the list price, does not fall. That is the wound. The system produces savings somewhere, but not at the point of care. The legal fight reached a turning point in 2020 when the Supreme Court ruled unanimously in Rutledge v. Pharmaceutical Care Management Association that states may regulate PBM reimbursement rates. That decision opened a door for state experimentation, but not a flood. By 2025, the conflict had reached state capitals. Legislators proposed transparency bills, pass-through mandates, and even bans on spread pricing. Some passed, others died in committee. The PBM industry pushed back, arguing that rebates actually lower net costs and that any regulation would disrupt a system that already delivers discounts to health plans. That argument is not entirely false. Rebates do lower net costs for some payers, but the FTC and GAO both found that the distribution of those savings is uneven and often invisible. For a patient with a high deductible health plan, the copay is often the full list price until the deductible is met. That patient can pay hundreds of dollars a month for a drug whose net price to the plan is half that. The PBM collects the rebate later, but the patient never sees it. This is why Congress has held hearings and why the FTC launched its inquiry. State attorneys general have opened investigations, class action lawsuits on behalf of employers and patients have been filed, alleging breaches of fiduciary duty and unjust enrichment. Some have settled for large sums with confidentiality clauses. The opacity begets more opacity. Medicare Part D plans rely on PBMs to administer formularies for more than 50 million enrollees. The federal government pays PBMs a per-member per-month fee, but the PBMs also collect rebates from drugmakers. Those rebates are supposed to reduce federal spending, but GAO has found that the exact amount retained by PBMs is often not disclosed to the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services. From 2016 to 2021, net prices for brand drugs grew much more slowly than list prices, according to industry analysts. That divergence is often cited as evidence that rebates are growing, but it also means the gap between list and net has widened. That gap is where the PBM lives. Specialty drugs for cancer, multiple sclerosis, and rare diseases now account for more than half of total drug spending. PBMs dominate specialty pharmacy through their own mail-order subsidiaries. A patient prescribed a specialty drug may be required to fill it at a PBM-owned specialty pharmacy, even if a local hospital pharmacy can provide the same drug. The PBM earns both the rebate and the pharmacy spread. That is the paradox in its final form. The middleman that was hired to reduce complexity has become the complexity. The climax is not a dramatic collapse. It is a standoff between an industry that controls access and regulators who cannot see inside its contracts. And in the middle is a patient at a pharmacy counter in Wichita, looking at a copay of $60 for a drug that the health plan may have bought for $20. The pharmacist cannot explain the difference. The employer cannot either. The PBM's spreadsheet has the answer, but that spreadsheet is not a public document. The PBM is not a conspiracy. It is a rational actor inside a machine that pays for opacity. Every contract, every rebate, every spread is the product of thousands of individually reasonable decisions. The employer wants lower drug costs, so it hires a specialist. The specialist wants to stay in business, so it negotiates hard. The drug maker wants market access, so it pays. The pharmacy wants to survive, so it accepts the network terms. No one in the chain is evil. Everyone is optimizing. But the sum of all those optimizations is a system where the price of a medicine depends less on its clinical value than on how much of the margin can be hidden. This is not a failure of markets. It is a market with a missing price signal. In a normal transaction, the buyer sees the price and the seller sees the revenue. In the PBM chain, the buyer, the employer or the government, sees a net premium, but not the spread. The seller, the pharmacy, sees a reimbursement, but not the rebate. The patient sees a copay, but not the list price or the net price. 3 different numbers for the same pill, and none of them is the true transaction price. The true price exists only inside a PBM contract marked confidential. That is why a regulator like the FTC can spend years investigating and still publish a report full of may and potentially. The facts are buried by design. The principle is older than pharmacy benefit managers. It is the principal-agent problem. When you hire an agent to negotiate on your behalf, the agent's incentives must match yours. If the agent earns more when the price is higher, the agent will not fight hard for a lower price, no matter what the contract says. Think of it as a tax preparer who is paid a percentage of your refund. That preparer may find deductions, but he also has an incentive to overstate your income. The PBM is paid a percentage of the list price, so it has an incentive to keep the list price high. That is not corruption, it is math. And math does not need a villain. The system has survived 30 years of reform attempts because every player is afraid to touch the wiring. Employers fear that dropping a PBM will raise their drug costs. Pharmacies fear that leaving a network will kill their business. Drugmakers fear that refusing a rebate will lose market access.
Patients fear that changing plans will make their medicine unaffordable, so everyone pays the toll, and the toll grows. The PBM's tragedy is not that it failed, it is that it succeeded too well. It became so essential that no health plan can refuse it, and so opaque that no health plan can verify it. A mother in St. Paul swipes a credit card for a $300 EpiPen, not knowing the health plan paid the PBM $150 after rebate. The pharmacist cannot tell her the cash price might be lower because the contract forbids it. The employer can't tell her because the employer does not know. The PBM knows, but the PBM has no reason to speak. That silence is the real product. So the next time you see a pharmacy counter, ask not what the drug costs, ask what the middleman paid for the right to be invisible. Maybe the answer is already in the copay you just paid. The question that remains is not whether PBMs are legal or illegal, efficient or wasteful. It is whether a market that depends on keeping prices secret from every participant except the gatekeeper can ever produce the one thing it was hired to produce, a true cost.